Well, good afternoon, fellow constitutionalists, and welcome to the Free-for-All-Friday edition of the Dan Clements Show, a Christian political talk show. I'm your host, Dan Clements, your constitutional warrior fighting for your right just to be an American. It is December 29th in the year of our Lord 2017. Remember, we're hyphen-free, PC-free zone. God is still in control, and He does love you. And I'm broadcasting live from the Hemlock Studios here in the beautiful, snowy central Susquehanna Valley in the great Keystone State. And the snow has let up. It's just a dusting on the ground right now, but at 10 degrees outside, it's not going to melt anytime soon. So we're supposed to get 1 to 2 inches tonight and tomorrow, so I might end up having to break out the snowblower for the first time this winter season. I had it out a bunch of times at the beginning of the year, and so I'm hoping everything works out with it. I've already had it started up. Did all the preseason checks on my snow thrower, so it's ready for action. I just don't know if I'm ready for that, for the action. And I also have to, I do have to share this with my YouTube folks out there. It is a meme. It's remembering there is Christmas dinner leftovers. So let me get this. Let me get this set. All right, folks, if you're listening to that in the podcast, there's an orangutan dancing around with his hands up in the air. Remembering there is Christmas dinner leftovers. Yeehaw! I like leftovers myself. I know some people don't, but I do like good leftovers. Because usually our leftovers are good because they come from good meals. You have to have a good foundation to start with. So I feel this is the last broadcast day of 2017. When you hear me next on Monday, it will be January 1st in 2018. Told my wife, I said, I can't believe that I'm already setting up shows with 2018 behind them. It'll take me a while to get that done. Dave asked me if I could take my snowblower up to his folks' house. I don't know. I don't think my two-wheel drive pickup truck would get there, Dave, to be honest with you. Yeah, over where Dave was raised, over around Erie, Pennsylvania, they got hammered. That lake effect snow. The lake has not froze over yet enough to stop the lake effect snow. And they're actually getting hammered north of Syracuse on the eastern end of the Lake Seneca. So they're really... If you live on the end of one of the Great Lakes, you get a lot of snow. Buffalo, clear down through Erie, Cleveland, clear over to where Dave grew up. They get a lot of lake effect snow. Matter of fact, down here we call it the snow globe in where I live here in the valley outside of Sunbury. Sometimes we get the end of the fingers from lake effect snow just in this area because of the way the topography is, and it sort of funnels some of that weather right down here, especially when we're getting a nor'easter and there's heavy lake effect snow. So we actually do get some of that clear down here outside of Sunbury, Pennsylvania, but not a lot. But every now and then the conditions are just right, and we get hammered. I mean, a couple years ago, we received, this is back when I was dispatching still, we got like 8 or 9 inches of snow here in Snydertown, and basically wasn't able to get out of town here because of all the snow and cleanup and everything like that. Well, come to find out, we got outside of Snydertown and they didn't get nothing. Basically, they got a dusting. You know, we got hammered here in Snydertown, so that's why they nickname us the Snow Globe here. And I know I just gave out the town I actually live in, but that's okay. We live out here in a little valley, and it's like I said, it's a little strange weather-wise and that. So, but it is, and this is where I got to laugh about some folks. It is winter in the northern hemisphere. You're going to get cold temperatures and you're going to get snow. If you don't want that, move south. or move to the southwest. Move somewhere where it's actually warmer and they don't get as much snow. Now, not to say it does not get cold like down in Texas or Arizona now, but it doesn't stay cold long, especially when you get down there closer to the Mexican border, down towards the Rio Grande. Today, I titled the show today, How Regressive is the Left in America. And I have a lot of articles here that we're going to talk about that. Some of them are catch-up articles like Representative Sheila Jackson Lee. There's an article that we'll talk about this. Daily Mail over in the UK. Dave and I remember the Daily Mail very well because that was one of the newspapers we get up in Scotland, up in Dunoon. But they have Sheila Jackson Lee in United Row has a history on planes. And I kind of figured this wasn't her first run-in with folks on airplanes. This is definitely not United's first run-in with controversy about passengers on their airplanes and that. So, again, it has nothing to do with her skin color and everything to do with her attitude. And quite frankly, her arrogance. And it's been my experience that dealing with the politicians I have dealt with. Now, some of them I met, and they're down-to-earth folks. Some of the representatives we have around here. But other ones are arrogant. Or you watch them on YouTube, or they're on a show that gives them snowball questions and don't really get in their face with the questions and stuff like that on interviews. And they do start to show their arrogance, and it amazes me how these people can be elevated to a position of prominence in our country by the very people they're supposed to govern, and then they get these attitudes like they know everything, or if you're former military, you know what this means. They're like officers when they go to the bathroom. They don't smell. That's all the further I'll go with that one. I really will. All right. Today's show is being brought to you by the Dan Clement Show Cafe Press site. If you like what I do here on the show and you want to support the show, but maybe you feel like my show isn't worth the support in and of itself, I hope you don't feel that way. But if you want a little bit more than my show, you can go over to my Cafe Press store at the Dan Clement Show Cafe Press, and the link will be up when you go over into the DanClementShow.com. Look on the menu bar, and you'll see the TDSC or TDCS, the Dan Clement Show, the TDCS Cafe Press site, and it'll take you right over to my store. And I have T-shirts for men, women, hoodies, coffee mugs, both ceramic for your desk and travel mugs. I got a mouse pad and also got a trucker's hat with the Dan Clement Show logo on it, and they look really spiffy. So if you like what I'm doing here and you want to help support the show and you like to wear bling to help promote the show, I invite you to go over to my Cafe Press store. Today's Daily Bible reading is kind of a lengthy one, but I thought this was very good. This is sort of sums up or finishes up the period of time from Christ's birth to when he was not finishes up, but it's sort of like, to me, it's the capstone when he was still a baby. And it starts in Luke chapter 2, verses 25 through 35, 10 verses, but it's not super long. And behold, there was a man in Jerusalem whose name was Simeon. And this man was just and devout, waiting for the consolation of Israel, and the Holy Spirit was upon him. And it had been revealed to him by the Holy Spirit that he would not see death before he had seen the Lord's Christ. So he came by the Spirit into the temple, and when the parents brought in the child Jesus to do for him according to the custom of the law, he took him up in his arms and blessed God and said, Lord, now you are letting your servant depart in peace, according to your word, for my eyes have seen your salvation, which you have prepared before the face of all peoples, a light to bring revelation to the Gentiles, and the glory of your people Israel. And Joseph and his mother marveled at these things which were spoken of him. Then Simeon blessed them and said to Mary his mother, Behold, this child is destined for the fall and rising of many in Israel, and for a sign which shall be spoken against. Yes, a sword will pierce through your own soul also, that the thoughts of many hearts may be revealed. So he not only fulfilled a prophecy, and God not only fulfilled a promise he made to Simeon, that he would not die until he'd seen the consolation of Israel, and he saw him. You know, he saw Jesus Christ as a baby, and he blessed him, and Joseph and Mary marveled at all this. And it was true that, you know, that a sword would pierce through her own soul also. And it wasn't a physical sword. It was the sorrow that a mother has when they lose a child, when their child dies. No matter how many prophecies have been fulfilled up to the point of Jesus Christ dying on the cross, that still hurt. That hurt emotionally for Mary and all of his friends and his apostles and that. But they still had that hope of the resurrection, and Jesus Christ proved that hope was real. Today's quote meal comes from John Barrymore. A man is not old until regrets take the place of dreams. Till regrets take the place of dreams. Today's short Bible lesson comes from Jack Wilkie over at focuspress.org, and this one was posted back in July of this year. The second biggest reason young people leave the church. And I think if you're a youth minister listening to this podcast, or you have a friend that's a youth minister, I highly encourage you to send them a link to this article. And you can find all the links to all the articles I share on this show over the danclementshow.com on the show notes on the menu. You'll see a show notes tab there. You can go right in here and just do the show notes. Or if you want to listen to the podcast online, just hit the podcast and go to today's episode, which is episode 947 if you follow along with those. All right, and I wanted to get all that stuff out of the way because it's not that I'm going to go super long in the show, but I wanted plenty of time to do some of the stuff I really needed to get done here. And there's some things, as a matter of fact, what you saw me drink was the official drink of the show, Rocky Mountain High brands. And I've been, just to let you know, and these are not stock tips. And I'm not telling you to go out and buy anything. I'm just giving you my experience and my thoughts on some of this stuff that and I've been tracking this, and not that I did this on purpose, but I went back and saw where my penny stocks really started to move, and they were they've been moving pretty aggressively. And it amazes me how much just that one little bill that President Trump signed, that a lot of the regressive left, and that's what we're going to start calling them on the show here, the regressive left, that a lot of the regressive left has called a scam. And I didn't get a chance to watch it today, but Robert B. Reich put up a new video on Facebook, and I'm going to go over and watch that and try to critique it for you, and maybe have a report on that Monday or Tuesday next week. And it's, again, it amazes me how wrong the left gets it. And I have an article that we're going to talk a little bit about today that comes from over at fee.org. I'll talk about how progressives cling to the past. And I got to thinking, you know, usually you associate progressivism with looking forward, you know, doing new and innovative things. But when you really get down to where the rubber meets the road with the regressive left, that's exactly what they are. They want to go back and hold on to failed ideologies of the past. They want to make sure that everybody else around them has to live through these failed ideologies of the past. And again, it goes to, you know, I was reading a meme this morning. It said a liberal man is someone who gives away everything to everybody else that's not his. And I was like, I really, really like that definition of a liberal man, or I should just say a liberal person, and not to be PC about it, because there's just as many, if not more, women who want to give away the store that's not theirs. And one thing I'm going to point out in this article when we get down to it, and this is something I want you to think about while we're going through the show today, is the word envy. The word envy, and this is something that they get, and he'll explain that in the article. But I'm getting the. I'm just getting the definition up for when we get down there. But envy is an emotion. And too many people on the regressive left, they make their decisions based on their emotions. And that's a dangerous time when you're emotional to make decisions. And this is what's been happening with the regressive left. This is what's been happening with the folks on the left. Perfect example is the pro-net neutrality folks. They know a lot of things about net neutrality that just aren't so. And even the term net neutrality was chosen, and when we get to this article, they'll talk a little bit more about it. I want to read the whole article to you. When we get to the article, if you noticed the Affordable Care Act, the ACA, Obamacare, those names for their regressive legislations are picked on purpose to give them an innocuous name, to make it sound like it's okie dokie. You know, that it's everything's good in the kingdom with these names that they give them, and they're anything but. Most of the time, and I haven't found an example yet, and if you give me one, I'll apologize, but I have not found an example yet of something that a regressive leftist in this country, and most of those folks reside in the Democrat Party, that are liberal, leftists, they're not progressive, they're regressive. Almost every piece of legislation or every idea that they float, you know, like an idea bubble or whatever, like Bill Clinton used to do. He used to float these balloons that had these ideas in it to see if the people liked them or not. And he used to have focus groups to help them with names of legislations and names of policies or principles and stuff like that. Like I said, Bill Clinton was one of these guys that wet his finger, put it up in the air, and to see which way the political winds were blowing. He wasn't a leader. He was definitely a follower, and I would have to say that most folks on the left, especially in the Democrat Party, that's exactly what they are. They're not leaders. They're followers. They're part of the herd mentality here in the United States. So, I just want to get that out to begin with. So they pick these names like the Affordable Health or the Affordable Care Act or net neutrality. Well, who would be against net neutrality unless you dig down below the name, forget the name net neutrality, and see what they're trying to do? And it was basically an idea of regulation, that only government can keep the internet neutral and free. And this confused, and still is confusing, a lot of people. It confuses people I thought would know better. Folks that are way more technically advanced than I am, you'd think they would know better that government regulation does not bring about freedom and neutrality. It only opens up the door for cronyism, crony capitalism, which a lot of people on the left complain about. And including, folks like my son. He complains about this crony capitalism. He complains about management because he's union, and yet he won't do anything about it. And I've challenged him on several occasions. If you don't like what management's doing, and he's had several opportunities to go through a management course that the railroad would supply them and go into management. And I said, if you got better ideas, why don't you do that? And he's a smart kid, and I've run into this with a lot of millennials. I've run in, especially working in a factory. I was working in a door factory before I came down with fibromyalgia. And a lot of these younger folks thought they had a better idea of doing things, but when you looked at what they were doing, it wasn't any better than what somebody else was already doing. They just found a different way to do the same thing, which wasn't better. Now, if they'd have found a different way to do it that made it quicker, easier for them to do it, then, that's a good thing. But when you just sort of rework something and it doesn't work any better and doesn't put out any more production, doesn't make the production easier for the person handling it, you haven't really done anything. And to sit there and complain about management, oh, management should do this or management should do that, I have a better idea. Well, you know what? Go and get your education and become part of management and fix it. If you think it's that bad, you fix it. And again, where you come up, what happens though, they don't want to fix it because they're in this herd mentality that everybody else agrees with them. And so management should automatically know that they have all these grievances. And it's like, no, they don't. And if you try to tell them, management, a lot of times it's delivered in the wrong way. I think delivery of new ideas, the delivery of the new ideas is almost as important as the new ideas are. Because if you deliver it in a certain way, you're going to either mock them or insult the folks in our management that implemented whatever the procedures are already. And so if you come at it at a point where you're an idiot, and this is what you should be doing with this, instead of saying, hey, can you help me understand why we're doing things the way we're doing? And because I see this. I see we're doing it this way, and I've tried it this way, and it's easier. I can get more production out. Can you critique this? And 9 times out of 10, they'll sit down and talk with you. At least that's been my experience. They'll actually sit down and talk with you and say, you know what? This is why we don't do it this way. There might be some safety concerns or inspection concerns or whatever. There might be some concerns that maybe the operator of the machine or the process we're in charge of or working with that we didn't see that they've seen before, that people before have come up with this way. But you don't get anywhere if you're an idiot and this is the way we need to be doing it. And if you don't do it, you're still an idiot. You see what I'm saying? And so this herd mentality doesn't lend at all to the delivery of new ideas to folks that, are in position of power. And I hear it, the more I get into this on social media and talking with liberals and stuff like that, the more I see this herd mentality. And I don't mean to insult people by saying that, but you need a term that describes what's happening out there. And that's exactly what's happening. You got a couple leaders, and I go back to, I love my Westerns. And I love, I love Louis L'Amour and some other Western writers and stuff. And it's, I keep thinking about the cattle drives. And what they would do after the roundup, they would get all the cattle, in a roundup, and they get it in a certain area before they took off on the cattle drive. And one of the things the trail boss would do, and maybe a couple of his outriders or a couple of the more experienced cowboys, is in the herd, they would look for the he-bull, the alpha bull, the one that was, going to lead everybody. And, sometimes a couple bulls will fight it out a little bit because you're in this whole herd and there's a bunch of females in there and they will fight over the female, they'll fight over the cows. So these bulls, these steers, are duking it out. And usually the stronger one wins, not all the time, but usually the stronger one wins. And he becomes the alpha bull, and he's the one that you're going to get out in front, and all the cows recognize this, all the other steers and everything, and they'll follow that alpha cow, or that alpha steer, I should say, not alpha cow. They'll follow that alpha steer. And it amazes me reading, some history accounts of cattle drives and stuff like that, how important that was. That they had this one bull that was the alpha bull that led the whole steer, that led them all. Now, that bull was being guided or steered by the other cowboys and the outriders and stuff on the herd. You had the drag, the cowboys that worked the drag that was behind them, in the dust and everything. That was about the nastiest job you wanted to have. You usually either want to be leading the steers or at the least be an outrider on the side. But anyway, so you have this herd mentality, and usually usually in a herd, and I'm not talking from experience, I'm just talking from what I've read and what I understand about this. The herd usually takes care of the weak ones, okay? Especially they don't normally take and I shouldn't say cows, they normally don't drive cows, on the cattle drives, because they leave them back on the range with their better bulls to impregnate them to keep the herd growing and stuff, and they only take certain weights and stuff on the cattle drives. But there's a certain steer called a muley that doesn't have horns. It might have lost its horns during the roundup, and it's in the roundup. It's a steer, but doesn't have any horns. And what will happen is the other steers that do have horns will start picking on that muley and drive him out of the herd. So a lot of times what happens on cattle drives is when cowboys see that, they'll separate the muley out, and that'll be chow for the next couple days on the trail ride. The cook will butcher it up and cook steaks and roast or whatever he's going to do, stews and stuff like that. And that'll be food for the drive for a couple days for the cowboys. And you can think about that like the muley, like ideas that the herd doesn't want in with them, because what'll happen, like I said, what'll happen, the other steers will start picking on him, pushing him out to the edge of the herd to get rid of him. And this is what happens with regressive leftists. They get ideas come in from, let's say, guys like me that are constitutional conservatives, and ideas and principles, and say, hey folks, we're going in the wrong direction with this idea. We need to change the direction here. And either the alpha bull will challenge that idea, or their stronger members of the herd will try to counteract that principle, that new idea and stuff, and try to drive you out of the herd. And if it gets far enough, you get far enough to the edge, then their sycophants that are supporting the herd will try to call you, and CULL, and call you out of the herd and destroy your ideas or whatever. And that's what we're dealing with in America today. We have folks that are looking to the past and saying that we have systemic racism in the United States, which we don't. I'm not saying, and that doesn't mean there's not any racism going on in the United States, but it's not institutionalized or systemic like it used to be. But see, the left, if that is the case, if there isn't institutionalized racism, then the regressive left has lost a tool out of their toolbox that they use to browbeat people into believing the way they believe. And so, and again, racism can come from any race. Just because you have black skin does not mean you can't be a racist. And in today's society, when you think of racism, you think of like guys like Spencer. For some reason, I can never remember his first name. He's a white supremacist, and he goes around the country speaking stuff like that. And whenever anybody thinks about racism, they think about the KKK, or they think about the white supremacists and folks like that. And that's okay to hate. That's, from their perspective, that's okay to hate. But there's a lot in the regressive leftist movement in America today that if you're black, you can't be racist. If you're black, you can't be racist. If you're a minority, you can't be racist. That's just not true. That's a non-starter, because I'm not saying number-wise, but there are a lot of racists that are black, that are Asian, that are Native American, the Aboriginal American, the American Indian. There are racists in all sorts of ethnic groups that base their racism on nothing but someone looks differently, or their skin's different than mine, and it spreads into a movement. And again, these ideas are hard to put down. And the reason why they're hard to put down is because too many folks that aren't racist fall in the trap, and we talk about this a lot on the show, this Kafka trapping. They fall in this trap where they start apologizing for things they never did. And again, you know, if you think about what a lawyer would tell you to be quiet, shut up, don't say a word, exercise your right to remain silent, make them prove their case. And more times than not, they don't have a foot to stand on. They don't have any evidence that someone's a racist. And I find this all the time when I challenge like my Facebook antagonists, and there's quite a few of them on there. They've been quiet lately. I guess it might be the holiday season. They've been quiet lately. But again, this is what they fall back on. They start labeling me. You know, and I don't mind labels, but, you know, at least make sure they're accurate and they're truthful labels. Okay? And I just ask them to prove it. And most of the time, almost 100% of the time, they can't prove anything. Well, I read this on your feed. Well, show me. Prove it to me. If you read something on my feed, prove it to me. Because, you know, I got pages saved in my, you know, in a folder. When I get in a real cantankerous, you know, shooting match, as it were, on social media, I take screenshots and save them to a folder, and I'll label that conversation. And they can do the same thing. But you know what? They don't. And when they accuse you of, and you ask them for permission, well, you just go back and look at your feed. No, I know what's in my feed. If you're bringing forth the accusation, bring the proof. And they never do. They never do either. And I'm telling you right now, there isn't any proof. But if they say there's proof, 9 times out of 10, they're either just not going to go find it, or when they try to look for it, they found out, hey, he isn't. You know, but they're not going to come back and apologize for labeling me something I'm not. And so some of the articles I want to bring up today, BuzzFeed has an article. It's stupid. I mean, racist BuzzFeed lists things white people need to stop ruining in 2018 by Paul Joseph Watson. Now, he posted this yesterday, and he's over from InfoWars. And let me make sure I got my okay. Just want to make sure I was over on my Firefox over here. Is it any wonder BuzzFeed is financially imploding? And this is a fact. This is something people have been tracking. These leftist sites, they're losing subscribers, they're losing viewers, and some of these leftist sites, you know, I visit a lot, but if they go too far overboard, and it's just starts repeating itself, like me looking at their sites and being able to rebut it within like 2 seconds, I'm going to quit using that site because they're making money off my clicks of reading their articles and stuff like that. So I'm going to get away from them, and that's what's been happening with BuzzFeed. Okay, BuzzFeed published a list of 37 things white people need to stop ruining in 2018. Yet another example of the left's brazen anti-white racism. The listicle claims that everything from macaroni and cheese to protest to the national anthem have been spoiled by the involvement of white people. And I didn't click on this. I did it earlier, but I didn't actually include it in my on my show notes page because the link's here in this article, racist BuzzFeed list. Imagine if Fox News or Breitbart had published a giant list of things black people are ruining. There would be an uproar, whereas this will go virtually unnoticed. And it just came across one of my feeds because I follow Mr. Watson. I follow his Twitter. I think I'm on Facebook, and I follow him on Gab and Minds.com and on YouTube. So this is a gentleman I follow, okay? To legitimize their racism, the left has created a form of mental gymnastics that allow them to convince themselves that promulgating racist stereotypes about white people is somehow acceptable. You probably heard the argument 1,000 times by now. It's impossible to be racist against white people because they hold institutional power. This not only ignores the core unchanging definition of racism, it completely falls flat on the face when you account for the fact that the left is using its monopoly on the dominant cultural institutions, media, entertainment, Hollywood, to spew anti-white racism. The left is using its institutional power to entrench the idea that racism is acceptable so long as it targets white people. And again, this is something that may be new to people's minds, but white people can be racist against white people. I mean, I didn't share this on here, but it was in the news this morning where this professor that was talking last year, talking about, all he wanted for Christmas, and it might have been this year. All he wanted for Christmas was white genocide, and he's getting death threats, and he's being threatened and stuff like that, and he's playing the victim. But he's a white guy that's wishing for white genocide. Isn't that racism? That he hates the white race even though he is white? Doesn't make sense, on the surface, but it happens. It absolutely happens. To illustrate how brazenly racist the article was, when BuzzFeed's official account tweeted out the story, it was in direct violation of Twitter's rules on hateful conduct. The policy states you may not promote racist and sexist tropes or other content that degrades someone. Asserting that people of a specific race are ruining everything is clearly promoting a racist trope. But don't expect BuzzFeed to be slapped with a Twitter ban anytime soon, since the social media network is notorious for its double standards when it comes to protecting racists on the left. The answer to racism is not more racism, but the anti-white crusade currently being waged by dominant leftist media outlets and cultural institutions is only emboldening white supremacists, creating a never-ending cycle of hatred that just leads to more resentment and more division. Given this kind of bile remains a core characteristic of their output, is it any surprise that BuzzFeed is financially imploding? And they put a link up in there. Now you go over here to this article, 37 things white people need to stop ruining in 2018. Macaroni and cheese. And I'm thinking, what in the world? Why are you all out there doing the most? That's a Twitter feed there. So we're ruining macaroni and cheese. White people are ruining macaroni and cheese, and this by Patricia Peck. She's on the BuzzFeed staff. Now, this was posted December 27, 2017, and she happens to be, and I'll bring this up here in a new tab, she happens to be black. Nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying anything against that. She just happens to be black. Okay, but she's part of a victim group, black people, and so she can't be racist. Protests. White people are ruining protest. I have no idea who K-pop is. The first K-pop group to be made up entirely of non-Koreans. Okay, I guess K-pop is some type of Korean music or dance or whatever. Sneaker culture. Makeup. Okay. Trees. How you greenify trees, that's where birds live. Or genderfy, excuse me. How do you genderfy trees? That's where birds live. Wealthy residents have fitted trees with anti-bird spikes in a bid to protect their expensive cars from bird droppings. Okay. I got something. Don't park your cars underneath trees, or don't have trees near your driveway where you park. White people ruining the United States of America. 70% of voters were white, and the majority voted for Trump. And it just goes on. The Oscars. White people are ruining the Oscars. White people ruin the Grammys. It goes on and on and on. I'm not going to go down through the whole list because to me it's just ridiculous on its face that they have this list out there. 37 things white people are ruining, and we should stop ruining in 2018. Look, as long as you're living your life and you're not aggressing against somebody else, and you're not forcing me to accept what you do, which is an aggression, have at it. Have at it. I don't know how white people ruin sneakers. I mean, that's all I wear. For the most part, casually, I have a pair of Skechers. Am I ruining sneakers because I'm wearing Skechers? What am I supposed to be wearing? It just amazes me, folks. It amazes me that you have a news outlet like BuzzFeed and they publish garbage like this. It's like this cultural appropriation. they've taken that to the umpteenth degree, and it never should have been. To me, it was a non-starter to begin with, because I don't look at it as I don't look at like different styles of food like Mexican or French cuisine, or Chinese, Japanese, Filipino cuisine. One of my favorites that I found that I really like, or at least I like some of the dishes, is one of my nieces got married, and the caterer was a Cuban. They catered Cuban foods, and man, some of that stuff's really good. And I like food, and so if I introduce Cuban foods into my household, am I appropriating the Cuban culture? No, I don't think I am. Matter of fact, I know I'm not. I appreciate good food, and if I cook it in my house, it's not appropriation. It's actually paying homage to the Cubans who came up with these dishes, or whatever the cuisine is you're talking about. It's honoring them that you've included this in your dietary schedule. So this cultural appropriation is another one of these. To me, is a non-starter. It really is. Now get over to the Sheila Jackson Lee. Nikki Schwab, U.S. political reporter from the Daily Mail, Nikki posted this over on, and the way they spell it, it's a girl. She posted this on the 27th of this month. I'm a queen, and I demand to be treated like a queen. How a Congresswoman involved in Race Row on plane was chauffeured a block to Congress and was nearly banished from the airline before. Sheila Jackson Lee, a Texas Democrat, has a storied history of bad behavior on planes and in automobiles. Previous news reports have captured Jackson Lee berating flight attendants for not getting a seafood meal in first class, as well as making her congressional aides, she sometimes refers to as you stupid blankety blanks, drive her one block to work. This week, the Congresswoman suggested a white woman was being a racist when the woman complained after United gave Jackson Lee her first class seat. The airline has stated that the woman had canceled this leg of her flight, which was how the Congresswoman was able to upgrade to the passenger seat. And again, we talked about this on yesterday's show, and when the news came out a couple days ago when this happened, this lady showed on her phone the app that she had. She did not cancel it from her end. It was on her end, it was still a legitimate seat. Matter of fact, she actually made the flight because she took the picture of Sheila Jackson Lee in her seat. When you're flying, you get your tickets, right? And you're getting connecting flights. You have your boarding passes already. That's already, especially if you're on the same airline. You already have your boarding passes, because I've done this before a couple of times. And you know what? They already have your seat assignment and everything on there. And sometimes, and this has been my experience with Pioneer Airlines out of Philadelphia. I went out to my twin niece's graduation out in Washington State. I used Pioneer until we got out to Boulder, and I didn't have a connecting flight with Pioneer, but I already had my tickets for Alaskan Air, and I already knew what my seat was ahead of time, and that was a different airline. So she knew that was her seat because that was what she paid for. That's what she was assigned to. And again, Sheila Jackson Lee, over the years, I'm going to see if I can get this over on. Okay. Several decades worth of coverage of Sheila Jackson Lee suggests she behaved badly on planes and on automobiles before this week's incident. The latest airplane drama came this week when a United Airlines passenger said she was booted from her first class seat to accommodate the Texas Democrat, who shot back by saying the only reason a woman complained was because Jackson Lee is black. No, the only reason why the woman was complaining is because she paid for a first class seat and she didn't get it because she was bumped erroneously. Now, she's been reimbursed for that, but that still doesn't make it right. And Sheila Jackson Lee evidently had a ticket for coach because it said she was bumped up to first class. Previous reports show the House member who was elected in 1994 has had a history of transportation drama, including berating airline attendants on the first-class flights and making her congressional staff drive her one block while waiting on her for hours and disrupting traffic. She's been documented calling her employees "you stupid blankety blanks" while referring to herself as congressional royalty. "You don't understand, I'm a queen and I demand to be treated like a queen." She was quoted saying in 1998, 3 years into her nearly 23-year tenure on Capitol Hill. Sheila Jackson Lee has had a, let's see here. Some of these articles, I don't like some of these articles here because they repeat themselves. All right, Representative Sheila Jackson Lee from Texas, she did nothing wrong when she was bumped to first class seat on a December 18th flight from Houston to D.C. Jackson Lee, however, had history of bad behavior on planes and an automobile. She was put in seat 1A, which was originally paid for by Jean Marie Simmons, a school teacher from Washington, D.C., who has accused the airline of evicting her from her seat so they could give it to a member of Congress. Friends in high places: Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, music executive Clive Davis, William Wilkerson, singer Aretha Franklin, and actor Denzel Washington attends Aretha Franklin's 72nd birthday celebration at the Ritz-Carlton in March 2014. There's a picture up there of that. Oh, this is funny. In 2002, the Weekly Standard did a deep dive into her travel demands. The Congresswoman, the article noted, lived about 200 paces from her Cannon Building Capitol Hill office, though still insisted on a ride. She couldn't walk a half a city block, in other words, folks, if that. On December 6, 2001, a blue Ford Contour with government plates pulled up to her apartment building where it idled for 23 minutes, blocking rush hour traffic. In the meantime, on one of Capitol Hill's busiest streets, the Weekly Standard said when the Congresswoman appeared, an aide opened the car door for her and waited for Jackson Lee, stood outside the automobile to make a phone call. Then an awkward moment ensued when Jackson Lee stared her staffer down until the Congresswoman's jacket and shawl were removed. A 2011 article in the Daily Caller, drivers for the lawmaker said she demanded that they run red lights and on highway shoulders, antics that caused one accident. Jackson Lee was screaming at the staffer to drive faster when the aide turned too sharply and ran the car into a wall, the Daily Caller reported. While her time was precious, staffers testified theirs was not. Whatever time she had told me to be there, I would always show up at least 20 minutes later and expect to wait at least 45 minutes, one of Jackson Lee's drivers told the Daily Caller. She was making me wait in the car, sometimes upwards of 5 to 7 hours per day. Idling the car so much started to damage the engine. My mechanic friend said, "You know, your car looks like you've driven it twice the miles you have," the staffer said. Before this week's United debacle, Jackson Lee had a tense relationship with Continental, the Houston-based carrier that merged with United in 2010. Jackson Lee's staff would book seats on multiple flights for her weekend trips back to Houston, allowing the Congresswoman to pick the trip that would best fit her schedule. This, however, would leave the airline in a bind, the Weekly Standard noted, as Continental wouldn't be able to sell off the premier seats she didn't use. And while Jackson Lee would book coach tickets, the Congresswoman was often bumped to first class. In February 1998, now let me stop the reading there, folks. When you're in coach and you get bumped to first class, you don't pay any extra for that. You don't. Now, if you have a first class seat and for whatever reason, just like this Simmons got bumped out of first class, now she gets reimbursed for that, but there's nothing, she doesn't have to pay any extra. And in my mind, if you're caught doing that even on the same airline, just different flights, different times and stuff like that, and you leave the airline in a lurch, I think you need to pay for that. But anyway, that's just my opinion. I read on. Do you know who I am? The Congresswoman reportedly said, "I'm Congressman Sheila Jackson Lee, Where is my seafood meal? I know it was ordered. After this incident, the Vice President of Continental's Government Affairs Office called Jackson Lee and warned her that her behavior needed to improve or she would not be flying the airline again, sources told the Weekly Standard. A year later, in May 1999, Jackson Lee had boarded a Continental flight out of Washington, D.C.'s Reagan National, only to find that she had misplaced her purse. A congresswoman proceeded to get off the flight to look for the bag back in the terminal. Meanwhile, the plane had left the gate with the missing purse on board. I'm sorry to laugh about this, but my. According to aviation lobbyists that the Weekly Standard talked to, Jackson Lee demanded she be let back on the plane and didn't believe it was against Federal Aviation Administration regulation. She accused the gate staff of racism and demanded to see their supervisor, who was a black woman. The Weekly Standard wrote, her purse, meanwhile, was unceremoniously dropped out of the cockpit window and ferried back to her. 18 years later, many of the themes remain the same as Jackson Lee pointed to racism as the crux of the problem, protesting she did nothing wrong when she was bumped to a white woman's seat December 18th on a flight from Houston to D.C. Representative Jackson Lee wrote on Twitter that she was upset she had to respond to allegations that she demanded special treatment. And she said she believes that Simon was so offended because she is an African-American woman, said that it is perceived she did anything wrong. She wants to apologize in the spirit of the holiday season. Jackson Lee was put in seat, and we already read over all that, okay? Now, just reading down through that, folks, people don't react to Sheila Jackson Lee because she's a black woman. They react to her because she's a horrible human being. That her actions point to that she's a horrible human being to deal with. It just amazes me how some of these folks get in Congress. And again, I've said this before on the show, especially when Barney Franks was a representative out of Massachusetts. How he got elected so many times to his seat out of Massachusetts shows the ignorance of the voters in his district. And I do believe the same thing with Sheila Jackson Lee. That this shows the ignorance of her voters. I don't care what their skin color is. If you've ever heard this woman talk, you go do some YouTube diving and listen to some of her speeches, some of the simple faux pas that she makes in her speeches, and these are simple things to correct before the speech is even said, or if she goes off book, it really gets funny. So again, it's not racism, it's that they're reacting to a horrible person. It's no more than that. And I don't think people need to apologize for that. If you're acting like a jerk, guess what? People are going to treat you like a jerk. I'm sorry. I try not to do that myself. I try to, as I tell my wife and friends of mine, that I'm not going to act the way they're acting. I'm going to treat them and kill them with kindness, actually. But there's other people out there that absolutely will not do it. And I'm not saying that I'll never do it. I'm just as human as the next guy. And if you catch me on a wrong day, or I'm in the wrong mood, or something happened earlier, and I didn't get to let loose on that, I might revert back to doing dumb and stupid every now and then, and let you have both barrels. You know, it's not my habit to do that, but, you know, I can see people getting frustrated with a woman like Sheila Jackson Lee. I don't care if she's a representative or not. It doesn't make her royalty. Doesn't make her any better than anybody else out there. And to use your congressional status to berate people, especially on airlines, you know, especially she books coach flights, but she flies first class. Oh, do you know who I am? I'm Sheila Jackson Lee. Okay. That and $1.50 you get a good cup of coffee at a convenience store. What do you want me to do about it? Oh, you're a congressperson? Okay. Why don't you fly back there with the rabble and see what they have to say to you? And honestly, folks, not walking 200 paces isn't even a half a block from her apartment to the office building in D.C. Not even. You know, that's back when they were remodeling Congress and stuff like that and doing some upgrades. They were meeting in other office buildings and stuff. And that's, to me, that's ridiculous. Yet, now, folks, she's a Democrat. Yet these Democrats are all about climate change and protecting the environment and stuff like that, saying man is creating this. But here you got a woman that has a car idling out there for 5, 6, 7 hours. Or you have Al Gore, who flies to all these conferences, and he owns several homes, especially his biggest one in Tennessee, that his carbon footprint that he's putting out is roughly the amount of a small city. And yet, he cares about the environment. You know, you see the hypocrisy that's going on there. Now, I have this story from Kevin Jackson. He's called the Black Sphere. He has a website, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter account and everything. He's known as the Black Sphere. He's an author and everything. And this just goes to the folks that don't believe me over at Let America Vote, that there's voter fraud going on and we have to do something about it. Former Alabama Secretary of State indicted for election fraud. Now, he posted this on December 29th. Do I really need to tell you this chick, he says, this woman is a Democrat? No wonder Roy Moore contested the results of the state election. And the update on that is he is still stalling the certification. Alabama certified it so they could seat Jones in the Senate, but Roy Moore has already filed paperwork and has a court injunction pending on that to stop the even though the state may have certified it, he's going to court to get it decertified, and this is one of the reasons why. And this was a WSFA report, and just to show you, I have this over here. Let me back it out to the home page here. NBC 12 WSFA. Okay, this is where the story actually came from. Former Secretary of State Nancy Worley turned herself in at the Montgomery County Jail Thursday and was released on bond. Her surrender comes after a grand jury indicted Worley on charges stemming from her unsuccessful campaign for re-election last year. During her 4 years in office, she faced a slew of complaints. They ranged from criticism of her selection of a gas-guzzling SUV that the state paid for to low morale of a number of employees who were unhappy. One of those was Ed Packard. I'm hoping that what this means is that the law that protects state employees is going to be enforced. 4 years of stacking the decks against Republicans and conservatives. How the heck did a red state like Alabama elect a Democrat in a statewide election? That alone should have triggered multiple investigations because you know that Democrat skullduggery is at hand. The article continues. The indictment charges that Worley broke the law when she wrote a letter to her employees with the words underlined saying, "I want to ask for your support and your vote in the June 2006 Democratic primary election." She went on to say she had always requested them not to discriminate against anyone because of his or her politics, race, religion, social status. Thus, she says, if you choose to support another candidate, you have every right to make that decision without any problem for me. Worley's attorney says that the last statement means employees were not pressured into contributing to her campaign, but Packard sees it differently. Aside from it being illegal, it just seems wrong for an elected official to request money or other kinds of campaign support from their subordinates because of that employer-employee relationship. That could be coercive just by its very nature. He said that's why it's illegal, folks. Let me stop the reading. That's why that's illegal. You know, she may have had all the best intentions in the world, but you just don't do that. He points to other items. Worley sent the employees like a bumper sticker and an envelope to volunteer and request a yard sign. Packard says his complaint represents a number of workers who were reluctant to do anything about it. I didn't have any reluctance to file a complaint because I believe it takes people standing up and doing the right thing if we expect the right things to happen, he said. The rules are clear, and yet each election cycle, we watch Democrats across the country blatantly break these rules. For those who wonder why Hillary Clinton acted so blatantly lawless, it's because there's rarely a penalty. Certainly at the level of Hillary Clinton, there is no penance. As for Worley, she is no Clinton, so she faces 5 misdemeanor and 5 felony charges. Worley refused to go on camera. However, she responded to the allegations against her in typical Democrat fashion. This is happening to Democrats throughout the country who don't bow down to Republicans. I know I speak for many Americans, this is Kevin Jackson speaking, who asked that their election simply be fair. But undoubtedly, the scumbag leftists will never allow that to happen, because if America had fair elections, the left would rarely win. And that's true, folks. It's just like the George Soros-backed group that I talked about earlier this week, Let America Vote. And the title of that show was Let America Vote Fraudulently. They haven't seen a voter ID law that they like. They call it voter suppression. They think Republicans and conservatives are on purpose suppressing the vote of minorities by requiring voter IDs. And yet every state that has been enacted, and any state that has tried, like Pennsylvania, to get it enacted, have put in provisions in their law that if you can't afford one, the taxpayers will foot the bill for it. And I'm all for that. If people want to be able to vote, or they want to vote, and you have to have an ID and you can't afford one, don't have one, yeah, let's spend a couple bucks to get them an ID. And if you live in Northumberland County and you don't have a ride there, let me know. I'll come get you and take you. I have no problem with that. And I bet you if you checked around in most any counties in the United States, there's one knucklehead like me that'll go out of their way to help somebody get their voter ID if they can't afford one. And so, again, this goes to all these people that say, oh, there is no voter fraud going on out there. And voter fraud doesn't just happen at the booths, okay? It doesn't just happen at the booths. It happens after the votes are done. There's tallying done up. I didn't get a chance to research this morning. One American News was reporting that a lot of the absentee ballots are coming in are fraudulent because they have names of people that don't even live in Alabama. They're out-of-staters or celebrity names, stuff like that. So they're having to go through and look at every one of the absentee ballots, and this is another reason why they shouldn't certify the vote yet. There was a lot of hanky-panky going on down in Alabama, and a lot of it was due to Democrats. Matter of fact, there was a commercial going on TV down in Alabama. We reported on this weeks ago before the midterm election that was funded by the Democrat Party that was saying if you vote the wrong way, if you vote for Republican, your vote is public and people will know it. And that was an outright lie. That was a total fabrication. And yet in our country, and I don't understand this, we have truth in advertising laws that if I have a product, I can't lie about it to get you to buy it. That's fraud. But these truth in advertising do not apply to political ads. And folks, I don't understand why it doesn't, because the truth can be known. It's searchable, knowable, and understandable. The facts are searchable, knowable, and understandable. So if someone is putting out an ad that is a bald-faced lie, that needs to be retracted, and an apology needs to be put out. The ads need to be ended. There should be some fines involved, and then they need to put out a retraction saying, you know, we didn't tell you the truth, the whole truth here. We didn't tell you the truth at all. We lied to you. We were lying through our teeth to you when we told you this, and that scared a lot of people. Because again, there's a lot of people in the United States of America that are willfully ignorant. They don't want to know. They don't want to take the time to be involved in the process to know what they're doing. They trust too many of these free radicals in the United States, like in these leftist groups. And I'm not saying there isn't some skullduggery going on, some hanky-panky going on in Republican or conservative campaigns. I don't think anybody's hands are clean when it comes to the election process, but we need to do something about it. And a lot of voter fraud doesn't happen in the polls. You know, like those commercials. That's voter suppression, but you don't hear Let America talk about that. that that's voter suppression. Oh no, because it benefits them. They're part of this regressive leftist democratic regime that's in this country. And Jackson's right. If the truth be told about liberals and leftists, they would rarely win. Because if you notice, even this last election cycle, it wasn't about the issues with Roy Moore and Jones. It wasn't about the issues at all. It was about some made-up sexual harassment charges that have fallen by the wayside since then. And it's kind of funny to me that Roy Moore has been in politics for years and has gone through elections, and this is the first election that any of this stuff came out. Something's fishy in Denmark here. You have to say that. If you don't, you're part of the problem. You have to point this out. And I'm not saying, again, we talked about the Me Too movement a couple days this week, and how the Me Too movement is you're guilty until proven innocent instead of innocent until proven guilty. First the allegations need to be investigated, and then if there's credible evidence after an investigation, then indictment should come down. But you can't just put this stuff out in the arena of the marketplace of public opinion, or the court of public opinion, and let the mob decide whether they're guilty or not without even knowing the facts of the case. As I'll guarantee you, 99.9% of those that thought that Roy Moore was guilty had no clue of the facts of the case. All they had was hearsay from his accusers with no evidence. And then the evidence that they did finally produce was manufactured. And again, I don't see charges being brought up against these folks that are falsely accusing men or women, but mostly men, of sexual harassment or sexual misconduct, sexual assault. And they need to. Now, there was a lady down, we shared a couple weeks ago, there was a lady down in Texas that got her comeuppance. And I'm glad she did. You shouldn't be going around bearing false witness against people, because you can destroy somebody's life, literally, with that. Okay, I have a couple more I'm not going to be able to get to today, but they're over in my show notes page. Did the FBI conspire to stop Trump? And this is an article by Patrick J. Buchanan over at LouRockwell.com. This is posted on yesterday, and it's a good article to read through. And I have mixed feelings about the FBI during the campaign running up to November 8th of last year. I believe the FBI was playing both sides of the aisle, because they didn't know who was going to win either. And they thought, at least if we're on Hillary's side and she wins, we're going to be okay. But if we're on Hillary's side and she loses, okay, we're in a position that we can try to hide some stuff to keep Trump in the dark. So they were sort of playing the odds at that. So it's a good read. Go read that article. I encourage you to go read that. One of the biggest things, this is an article by Brad Palumbo over at FEE.org, Foundation for Economic Education, one of my go-to economic sites. I thought this article was great. No, tax cuts don't kill people. And that was the mantra from Pelosi, from a lot of people out there, that tax cuts kill people. And Brad does a really good job. When I read the title, I love good titles. No, tax cuts don't kill people. You would think some of the regressive Democrats out there that it was Armageddon. The final battle in the world where Christ was coming back to set up his millennial kingdom, which he's not. That's what we call premillennialism, and it's not supported by scriptures. But you know what I mean. They just think this is the final battle to end all battles, that these tax cuts are tantamount to Armageddon. Two more articles from FE.org. How can you, this is a good question. I've asked this before myself. How can you give back something that wasn't first taken? How can you give back something that wasn't first taken? You hear politicians, especially the regressive Democrats, you hear how, well, we're giving back to the people this, and this. Matter of fact, some of our, before Lou Barletta, and the name escapes me, the congressman that he replaced, he was always talking about, I brought all this stuff back to the district. Giving it back. Well, how can you give it back unless you took it first? Why don't we just not take it to begin with to keep it in the district? How about that? So it's a good article by Mark Perry over at FEE.org. And then the final one, before I get to the one I really want to read into, finish up the show. And this one, I skimmed over it, and I really want to read into this one and really get down to the nuts and bolts. This is by Randall G. Holcomb over at FEE.org, and he posted this on the 26th of this month. True justice is restitution, not punishment. And just reading the title and skimming over the first couple paragraphs, I tend to agree with that statement. True justice is restitution. How many criminals are in prison today that they destroyed somebody's life or stole something from them or whatever, and the restitution, like if there's civil penalties or something like that, are never recouped by the victims. If something was stolen, they never get that back. It's never restored to them. And Randall makes a pretty good argument for this, for restitution. And matter of fact, this is a biblical principle, especially in the Old Testament, but it does carry over in the New Testament. This is something that would be really good to flesh out here. But the one I want to get to today is How Progressives Cling to the Past, Foundation for Economic Education by Logan Albright. Now, he posted this on the 26th of this month also, or wait a minute. Yeah, the 26th of this month also. Now, the political left, particularly in its extreme forms, have always been skillful in the use of language to further its ends. Recognizing that perception matters more than reality, exponents of socialism and communism use words in a particularly Orwellian way, imparting meanings to words directly opposite to what their etymologies would lead us to suspect. A well-known example of the word liberal, which derives from Latin liber, free, originally applied to thinkers who favored individual liberty and small government. The word now, thanks to tireless efforts on the left, connotes an advocate of high taxes and invasive regulations. What leftists really want is to return to a culture both primitive and tribal. A less recognized provision of language or perversion of language can be found in the term progressive. Now preferred by the liberal to liberal by many on the left, it's not hard to see why a movement would desire such a label. Progressive connotes progress. Progress is, by definition, a good thing. Nobody speaks of progress towards bankruptcy or tyranny. Progress implies movement towards a desirable goal. Well, who could be against that? But here again, the word doesn't mean what you would expect. In fact, it means quite the opposite. For all their talk of progress, what leftists really want, the foundation on which all of their ideas are based, is a return to a culture both primitive and tribal, and I'll explain. The word progressive, in the early 20th century, when the term progressive began to be used, it had some merit in that it was not wholly dishonest. Progressives of that time were interested in science, technology, and the future. American eugenists sought to apply the theories of Charles Darwin and George Mendel to the human race, engineering a more perfect species through scientific design. The Italian futurists may have been fascists, but at least they were honest about their desire to tear down the traditional structures and look only forward. All of this was built upon the writings of Marx and Hegel, who claimed that the tide of history was something more than an accumulation of chance events, but rather a force with definite direction leading us all into a predetermined future of global communism. The remnants of this movement are seen today in the cultural Marxism that attempts to destroy religion, the family, and even the well-worn institutions of gender. The word has been attached to a wide variety of leftist policies, which are, in a word, regressive. In the century since progressivism rose as a popular movement, however, the word has lost much of its meaning and has instead been attached to a wide variety of leftist policies, which are, in a word, regressive. The most obvious, folks, example of this is the collectivist tendency towards economic egalitarianism. In the worldview of the socialist, we should all be materially equal, and it is unjust for some to have more than others. Property, we are told, is theft, and social justice demands the constant redistribution of wealth to ensure that the rich are not better off than the poor. What lies behind this? It is an altruistic concern for the well-being of the poor? Hardly. If you listen to the rhetoric of the egalitarians, they are less concerned with bringing the poor up as to bringing the rich down. As Margaret Thatcher put it in describing the views of left-wing opponent, he would rather have the poor poorer, provided that the rich were less rich. A primitive worldview. Now we're getting down to the nuts and bolts of this article that I really want to get to. There is a word for this, although it is seldom discussed and more seldom understood. The word is envy, the resentment of someone else's success. This is not to be confused with jealousy, which is to desire what someone else has. And a biblical term of that would be covetousness. Some people might, especially in the Christian, Christian circles, people would understand that jealousy probably would be better translated covetousness, which is the desire to what someone else has. Envy merely yearns to spitefully diminish those who succeed. Why should men envy one another? The answer lies in a mistaken worldview, one that views economic life as a zero-sum game. In short, the belief that one man's gain must necessarily be another man's loss. And this is, folks, this is the whole regressive leftist idea when it comes to taxes, when it comes to wealth redistribution, when it comes to just about anything they think about, okay? Everything to them is a zero-sum game. If you advance, someone has to lose just because you advanced. And that, folks, that's just not the case. If you've listened to the show long enough, you know that's not the case. But I go on here. The idea that there's something inherently wicked about success is as old as man himself. Nothing is more primitive than this way of looking at the world. Even the most cursory study of anthropology reveals how common it is among tribes untouched by civilization, where the success of individual members is attributed to witchcraft, the evil eye, or some other supernatural method of prospering at the expense of others. In classical mythology, the gods are frequently motivated by envy to lash out at successful humans. One is reminded of Ereshkigal, a shepherd's daughter who turned into a spider by Athena for the sin of being good at weaving. Even the story of the time. Now this, I'm going to have to correct this in here, but I'm going to read what he has and I'll correct it after I read it. Even the story of the Tower of Babel in the Old Testament sees humans cooperating to build an impressive structure only to be cast down and their language is confused by an envious God. The idea that there's something inherently wicked about success is as old as man himself. Now, let's go back to the story of the Tower of Babel. It wasn't that God was envious. God didn't need to be envious of man and their accomplishments. Okay? But if they were left to their own devices and they stayed that way, there would be nothing that would be out of their reach to do. And that wasn't God's purpose for man here on earth. That absolutely was not their purpose. And so it wasn't that God was envious of them, because God created the heavens and the earth, for goodness sake. You know, God has nothing to be envious of man. So I just wanted to correct that. But anyway, it is only by abandoning such magical thinking and embracing the ideas of private property and individualism as humanity managed to claw its way out of the depths of poverty and privation that characterized early man. In his exhaustive treatment of envy, as a motivator of social behavior, socialist Helmut Schoeck comments on the irony of progressivism. The actual point of departure for socialist and for left-wing progressive generally is identical with that of particularly envy inhabited primitive people. What for more than a century has made itself out as a progressive mental attitude is no more than regression to a kind of childhood stage of human economic thinking. And let me stop the reading there. When he's talking about the childhood stage of human economics, think back when you had a toy. You know, if you're playing together, in order for your playmate to have more toys than you, if he wasn't given one, guess what? They'd take it from you. And you didn't like that. Now, he may have been envious because you had the better Tonka toys. Okay? So he might take one from you, and then there might be a fight. There usually was. But this is a childhood stage of human economic thinking. You know, that I had, in order for me to gain, I had to take from somebody. In order for my gain to happen, someone had to lose. And again, we have Nobel Prize winning economists like Paul Krugman at the New York Times. He's a New York Times columnist who thinks this way. He got a Nobel Prize for this. Go figure that one out, right? I read on. F.A. Hayek elaborates on this in his The Fatal Conceit, in which he argues that the socialist impulse is a natural one because it conforms to the ancient structures of tribes and families where property is shared and the individual is less important than the group. The error comes in applying the same model to large groups of unrelated strangers where the bonds that hold tribes together and enforce accountability are almost wholly absent. Progressivism, regressivism. It is almost comical to watch the so-called progressives deride conservatives for allegedly trying to cling on to the past while at the same time condemning all that is new in favor of ancient superstition and folly. For all its pro-science rhetoric, the progressive movement maintains a hostility to technological advances. Let me stop reading here. This is no more, I mean, there's a whole bunch of evidence in this when it comes to the science of a creation science. Looking into and trying to answer the question, the hypotheses, was this world created or did we evolve? And that's a legitimate science. But the regressive left doesn't look at it this way. They don't look at they look at that we're stepping backwards because we're looking at God instead of, you know, creation science is a relatively new science that is looking into the questions of where did we come from? And it's a legitimate, in my opinion, and if my opinion means anything to anybody, in my opinion, that is a legitimate course of study. It's a question asked that needs answered. That a lot of people find that the scientific world that believes in evolution, their answers have been found wanting because it leads on a lot of things. I don't want to go into that. I just want to put that out for you folks. Economics is not only an area in which the progressive betray their reverence for the past, but for all of its pro-science rhetoric, the progressive movement maintains a hostility to technological advances like genetically modified crops and ride-sharing services like Uber and Lyft, usually on protectionist grounds. And of course, little need to be said about the radical environmentalists who openly long for time when humans barely existed in enough numbers to make an impact on the planet. Yet in pointing out that progressivism is actually regressive, it is important not to fall into the opposite fallacy that something is bad simply because it is old or good because it's new. This is certainly not the case in many instances. There is much to be said for ancient traditions such as roaring bonfires and the nuclear family. While the fact that selfie sticks are a recent invention does not make them less of a cancer upon the planet. One must remain suspicious, however, of an ideology that disguises its true nature by claiming to be forward-looking when it's actually rooted in the distant past. With this in mind, I suggest that those of us who value truth and integrity cease our continual retreat into the battle of words and instead mount a rare counteroffensive. Let us call the brand of primitive collectivism what it really is. I propose the term regressivism, and I hope you will join me in this adoption. And yeah, I've been skirting around the fringes of that for quite a while now, about regressivism, and actually saying what I mean when I say that. So I'm going to start using regressivism instead of calling them progressives. They're the regressive left, and what they're practicing is regressivism. And again, they want to go back to failed systems of the past. And someone shared a joke with me on Facebook. A socialist is just a lazy communist that hasn't got up and went the extra steps to communism, which I thought was kind of comical and funny. I really did. Oh, folks, I tell you what. I know a lot of people are doing a year-end show as far as what they're looking forward to. I haven't had the time yet because I'm still fixing some minor things on the website that I finally got fixed yesterday and totally operational. So I haven't had time to really work on doing a year-end show like I was thinking about doing on Monday. So I will shoot out a short video. I'm trying to get over here to my music and that. I'm going to try to get a short video out either today or first thing Saturday to let you know if I've worked on that. Today I'm going to work on trying to get hooked up to like Google Hangouts so I can actually record that and maybe broadcast it later. But we'll be live on Google Hangouts. I'm not sure if we can be live on YouTube at the same time, but I'm going to try to record that, which is more important to me to get it recorded and put it out later on YouTube. So I'm still looking into that. I'll send some emails out to some folks if they have time to come on a hangout on Monday to help me try to remember some of the things in 2017 and looking forward to some things in 2018, which would be real great for us to do. So it's honestly, folks, it's been a pleasure this year to have broadcasted either on Blog Talk Radio at the beginning of the year and coming over to YouTube and doing a live stream on YouTube, which has been a work in progress ever since I started it. So, again, it's been a real pleasure being with you in 2017. Looking forward to our next year together. Lord willing, the creeks don't rise, and hopefully we're have a, even though we've been blessed this year, hopefully next year is even going to be a bigger blessing for us. This has been the Dan Clements Show. I'm your host, Dan Clements, your Constitutional Warrior. Remember, if you aim at nothing, you'll hit it every time. Have a great rest of the day, and God bless, folks. And remember, on Sunday, attend the church of God's choice, not your choice. And we'll see you Monday at noon.